The sky above Area 51 was typically clear and arid, but today it thrummed with a strange energy as the first documented alien spacecraft descended silently. Commander Eli Turner stood among his team, his gaze locked on the sleek, silver craft as it hovered above the landing strip. "Looks like they're finally here," muttered Lieutenant Marcus Reed, his voice tinged with a mix of awe and apprehension. Eli nodded, adjusting his uniform. "Stay sharp, everyone. We need to keep this smooth and diplomatic." His team, a mixture of military personnel and scientists, nodded in agreement. Dr. Sarah Chun, the lead xenobiologist, stepped forward, clutching her digital recorder. "Do we have any idea what to expect, Eli?" she asked, her eyes never leaving the spacecraft. "Only what the initial transmissions suggested," Eli replied. "They call themselves the Xiphorians. Seem peaceful enough, but we'll judge based on their actions, not just their words." The spacecraft's doors hissed open, and a ramp descended towards the ground. 3 figures emerged, their bodies slender and elongated, skin shimmering like polished metal under the Nevada sun. Captain Alex Ramirez, the head of security, instinctively stepped forward, his hand near his sidearm. Eli placed a hand on his shoulder. "Easy, Alex. Let's not start a galactic incident on day 1. The lead Xiphorian, taller than the others, extended a hand, its fingers long and tapered. "I am Zorith, this is my associate Mirela, and our scientist Vorek. We come in peace and hope for fruitful relations with humanity." Eli stepped forward and cautiously shook Zorith's hand. "Commander Eli Turner, welcome to Earth. This is Dr. Sarah Chun and Captain Alex Ramirez." Mirela, who had delicate features and eyes like swirling galaxies, tilted her head slightly, examining the humans. "Your planet is very bright and full of life. We are eager to learn more about your species and your culture. We have much to share and are equally curious about yours," Eli said, signaling his team to lower their guard. "Shall we head to the conference room? We've prepared a formal welcome and a brief introductory session about our planet." As they walked, Vorek looked around, his gaze analytical. "We noticed your planet's rich resources from space," he commented, his tone neutral yet curious. Eli exchanged a glance with Sarah. "Yes, Earth is diverse in ecosystems and life forms. We manage our resources carefully," he said, stressing on carefully, hoping the aliens would catch the underlying message. Inside the conference room, Eli invited the Xiphorians to take a seat at a large round table. Refreshments were served, and screens displayed images of Earth's landscapes and cities. Zorith nodded appreciatively. "You have achieved much with your technologies. We look forward to exchanging knowledge and perhaps assisting each other in our endeavors." Marcus, who had been quiet, spoke up. "And what kind of assistance are you looking for from us?" His tone was friendly, but his eyes were sharp. Mirela smiled, a glimmer passing over her lips. "We seek partners in our exploration of the cosmos. Earth is strategically placed for a hub in this quadrant." As the discussion unfolded, Eli felt a mixture of excitement and caution. These first conversations would set the tone for future relations. Earth had to appear strong yet welcoming, capable yet not a threat. As he engaged the Xiphorians in discussion, every choice of word, every diplomatic gesture, was calculated to establish Earth not just as a host, but as a partner in the eyes of their new cosmic neighbors. 2 weeks had passed since the arrival of the Xiphorians, and the atmosphere at the military base had shifted from one of curiosity to cautious tension. Commander Eli Turner found himself in a meeting with his senior staff, discussing recent developments. Reports indicate that the Xiphorians have been surveying unauthorized areas, Captain Alex Ramirez said, spreading out satellite images across the table. "Look here and here. They're all over the Arctic and the Amazon, far from their agreed operational zones." Lieutenant Marcus Reed leaned over the photos, frowning. "Their technology could be harvesting data on our resource deposits. They've been awfully curious about our mining and oil extraction techniques." Eli rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Have we confronted them about this yet?" Dr. Sarah Chun, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. I approached Mirela about their movements. She claimed ignorance and insisted it must be a misunderstanding regarding their exploration permits. That doesn't sit right with me, Alex interjected. We need to establish firm boundaries. This isn't just about exploration. It's starting to look like exploitation. Eli nodded in agreement. All right, let's set up a direct meeting with Zorith and his team. We'll lay out our concerns clearly and see how they respond. Later that day, Eli, Alex, and Marcus walked into the conference room where Zorith and his associates were already seated. The air was heavy with an unspoken urgency as Eli began the meeting. Zorith, we've observed your teams moving outside the designated areas. Eli started, his tone firm but diplomatic. These actions concern us. We need to understand your intentions to ensure that our relationship remains positive. Zorith's thin lips tightened slightly. Commander Turner, we appreciate your concerns. It seems there has been a significant misinterpretation of our exploratory rights. We will review our operations immediately. Marcus chimed in, his voice steady but insistent. We'd appreciate transparency in your review process. Perhaps joint patrols could ensure that both sides are interpreting the treaty terms consistently. Mirela, who had been silent, nodded slowly. A joint effort could indeed foster deeper trust. We value our relationship with Earth and would not want minor oversights to overshadow our broader intentions. As the meeting concluded with agreements to increase collaboration and transparency, Eli couldn't shake a nagging feeling. Once back in his office, he made a call to his contact in the National Security Agency. Keep an eye on all Xiphorian communications, Eli instructed. Something doesn't feel right. We need to know exactly what they're up to, and we need to know yesterday. The following days were filled with joint patrols and shared data sessions. Despite the apparent cooperation, the Xiphorians remained guarded about their technology and motives. Eli and his team increased their vigilance, monitoring every Xiphorian movement and communication. In his office late one evening, Eli reviewed the latest surveillance reports with Alex and Marcus. Look at this, he pointed at a transcript. They've been sending encrypted data back to their ship. It's not just observational data. It's detailed scans of our defense systems. Alex leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed. This is not what allies do. We need to prepare for the possibility that the Xiphorians may not be as friendly as they claim. Eli nodded solemnly, his mind racing with the implications. Keep this between us for now. Ramp up security protocols and let's prepare a contingency plan. We have to protect Earth no matter what comes. The chapter closed with the team setting in motion plans to safeguard their planet. Unsure of the Xiphorians' true intentions but determined to stand firm against any threat, hidden or overt. The late-night hum of the control room was drowned out by the sharp clicks of keys and the occasional muttered curse. Eli Turner leaned over Marcus Reed's shoulder, watching the screen as streams of data flowed across it. Encrypted again, Marcus muttered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Whatever they're transmitting back to their ship, they're making damn sure we can't read it. Eli frowned, his arms crossed. How long until we can break through? With their level of encryption? Days, maybe weeks, Marcus admitted. But I'm working on a workaround to intercept it before it's fully scrambled. Before Eli could respond, a quiet knock on the door startled both men. They exchanged a glance before Eli called out, "Come in." The door opened to reveal Mirela, the Xiphorian scientist. Her silver-toned skin shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights, and her wide, galaxy-like eyes seemed to take in everything at once. "Eli," she began, her voice soft but urgent. "We need to talk. Privately." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Eli gave him a subtle nod. "I'll handle this, Marcus. Keep working on that encryption." As Marcus left the room, Eli gestured for Mirela to take a seat. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated, glancing at the monitors displaying Earth's topographic data. "You're right to be concerned about my people's activities," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've come to warn you. Zoritha's intentions aren't as peaceful as he claims." Eli's jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" Mirela leaned closer, her gaze locking with his. The exploratory teams aren't just surveying resources. They're preparing reports on Earth's vulnerabilities, natural, technological, and military. Zorith believes your planet could be an invaluable asset to our expansion plans. For a moment, Eli just stared at her, weighing her words. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked finally. "You're one of them." "I am," she said, her voice firm. "But I don't agree with them. I came on this mission because I wanted to learn, to exchange knowledge, not to take what isn't ours. What they're doing goes against everything I believe in." Eli leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "If what you're saying is true, why should I trust you?" Mirela's expression softened. "Because I'm risking everything to help you. If Zorith finds out I've spoken to you, I'll be branded a traitor or worse." Eli studied her for a long moment before nodding. "All right, what do you suggest we do?" Mirela glanced at the monitors again, her fingers brushing the edge of the desk. "Zoritha's encryption protocols are advanced, but I know their weaknesses. I can help you decode their transmissions, but only if you're willing to trust me." Eli hesitated, his mind racing through the implications. Finally, he extended a hand. "If you're willing to take the risk, so am I." Her slim fingers wrapped around his, her touch cool and strangely comforting. "We'll need to move quickly. Once Zorith realizes the data has been compromised, he'll take drastic measures." The next few days were a blur of covert operations. Mirela worked alongside Marcus, her alien knowledge complementing his technical expertise. Eli and Alex coordinated the team, ensuring that their activities remained hidden from the Zyphorian delegation. Late one evening, Eli and Mirela found themselves alone in the control room. The faint glow of the monitors illuminated her features as she scanned the latest intercepted transmission. "You're taking a big risk," Eli said quietly, his voice tinged with genuine concern. She looked up at him, her gaze unwavering. "So are you. But sometimes doing the right thing requires taking risks." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the weight of their shared burden seemed to fade. Without thinking, Eli reached out, his hand brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. "I never thought I'd be working with someone like you," he admitted, a small, almost rueful smile playing on his lips. Mirela tilted her head, her shimmering skin catching the light. "And I never thought I'd find someone on this planet who truly understood me." Their fingers intertwined, and Eli felt a strange warmth spread through him. The tension that had hung between them since their first meeting seemed to dissolve as they stood there, caught in a moment that felt both fragile and profound. The moment was interrupted by the sudden beep of the monitor. Mirela pulled her hand away, her focus snapping back to the screen. "The transmission," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "We've cracked it." Eli stepped closer, his eyes scanning the data. "What does it say?" Mirela's face hardened as she read the decoded message. "It's worse than I thought. Zorith is accelerating his plans. If we don't act now, it may be too late." Eli placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm. "Then we act. Together." Mirela looked up at him, her expression a mixture of determination and something deeper. "Together," she echoed. As the two of them prepared to take the next step in their risky alliance, Eli couldn't help but feel that this partnership, however unlikely, might be the key to saving Earth. The moonlight poured through the windows of the underground operations center, casting long shadows over the room's cramped consoles and stacks of data cartridges. Commander Eli Turner, now a few nights into his clandestine collaboration with Mirela, rubbed the back of his neck as he leaned over Marcus Reed's shoulder. The younger man was tapping rapidly on a holographic keyboard, his focus unbroken. "Got anything yet?" Eli asked, glancing at the encrypted file on the screen. "Almost," Marcus muttered, chewing on his lower lip. "Mirela's algorithm is doing its thing. Just give me a sec." Before he could finish, the screen lit up, and lines of previously indecipherable alien script resolved into readable text. Marcus sat back, letting out a low whistle. "There we go. It's the Zyphorian deployment plan." Eli straightened, his eyes scanning the document. "Deployment plan? For what?" Mirela stepped closer, her metallic-hued eyes gleaming under the dim lights. It outlines a phased resource extraction schedule. But there's more. They've been mapping critical Earth infrastructure, power grids, satellite arrays, major trade hubs. Eli frowned. This isn't just about resources. If they know our infrastructure that well, they could cripple the planet, Marcus finished grimly. Eli placed both hands on the table, his voice measured but firm. We need proof before we take this upstairs. Mirela, is there anything else you can get us? Something concrete that'll leave no room for doubt. Mirela hesitated, then nodded. I can access more of their restricted databases. It'll take time and we'll need to be careful. If Zoratha's people notice unauthorized access, we risk them shutting everything down. Marcus crossed his arms, shaking his head. Eli, this is getting dangerous. We're already skating on thin ice. Eli looked between them. I know it's risky, but if what Mirela says is true, we can't stand by. We need to move carefully, yes, but we need to keep moving. As the team dove back into the data, the hours slipped away. By the time dawn broke over the desert, they had unearthed a staggering amount of information. Schematics for alien resource gathering devices hidden in remote Earth locations, coded directives from Zyphorian command, and even encrypted transmissions that hinted at tensions within the Zyphorian ranks themselves. Mirela leaned against the table, her voice soft as she spoke. Zorath isn't acting with the full approval of the Zyphorian Council. He's operating under a mandate that's flexible at best. Eli raised an eyebrow. You're saying he's going rogue? Not exactly, Mirela said carefully. He has the Council's blessing to explore and establish relations, but this kind of large-scale exploitation? It's his interpretation of their orders. If the Council knew he was taking it this far, they might shut him down, Marcus finished, a spark of hope lighting his eyes. Eli tapped his fingers on the table, thinking quickly. Then we need to show them. If we can get this information to the Zyphorian Council without Zorath intercepting it, they might put a stop to all of this. Marcus frowned. And how do we send a message to a governing body on another planet without them knowing? I have an idea, Mirela said, her voice steady. There's an old diplomatic relay on the Zyphorian ship. It's rarely used, but it's still connected to the Council's communication network. If we can get to it, we can send them everything we've found. Eli looked at her, his mind weighing the risks. If we do this, it has to be flawless. No traces. No mistakes. Mirela nodded. I'll handle the technical side. You and Marcus will need to create a diversion. Marcus groaned. Why do I always get stuck with the dangerous part? Eli smirked. Because you're good at it. Later that night, the three of them slipped onto the Zyphorian ship. Mirela led the way, her movements precise and deliberate. Eli and Marcus stayed close behind, their eyes darting to every shadow and corridor. When they reached the relay chamber, Mirela got to work immediately, connecting her handheld device to the alien console. This will only take a few minutes, she whispered. Keep an eye out. Eli and Marcus stood at the entrance, listening intently for any signs of approaching Zyphorians. Marcus glanced over at Eli and muttered under his breath. This feels like a bad idea, man. Relax, Eli replied, though his own nerves were fraying. We've got this. Mirela's fingers moved in a blur, the console emitting faint chirps and lights. Almost there. A faint echo of footsteps reached their ears. Eli turned sharply to Marcus. They're coming. Be ready. As the steps grew louder, Eli's mind raced. Should they bluff, hide, or try to take out the Zyphorian guards quickly and silently? Before he could decide, Mirela let out a soft exhale of relief. It's sent. We need to go. Now. Eli motioned for her to follow, and the three of them retraced their path through the ship. The tension was palpable, each step feeling heavier than the last. When they finally reached the airlock, they slipped out into the cool desert night and exhaled as one. Back in their safe house, Mirela brought up a holographic display of the data they had sent. It's out of Zoratha's hands now. The Council will see it. Eli placed a hand on her shoulder, a small smile breaking his usual stoic expression. You did good, Mirela. We'll see what comes next. She looked at him, her expression both grateful and weary. We all did. And with that, their uneasy alliance took on a new weight as they prepared for the fallout that would inevitably come. The morning sun gleamed off the glass domes of the temporary Earth-Xiphorian Alliance base. The air inside the conference room was thick with unspoken tension as Commander Eli Turner entered. Captain Alex Ramirez stood at the far end of the room, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, while Marcus Reed leaned against the table, scanning a datapad. "You called us, Eli?" Alex asked, his voice measured but strained. Eli nodded, closing the door behind him. "We need to regroup. The Council's still reviewing Mirela's transmission, but Zoratha's already taking steps to tighten his grip on operations. His people are doubling down on resource extractions. We need a counter-strategy. Something that'll slow him down while we wait for the Council to act." Marcus set the datapad down and frowned. "Any movement we make could tip them off. They'll know we're onto them." "We don't have a choice," Eli replied, his tone firm. "If Zorath expands those operations, we lose leverage. We have to show them we're not afraid to push back." Alex rubbed his temples. "You're asking us to openly defy an advanced alien force while the Council twiddles its thumbs. We don't have their tech or their numbers. What exactly are we supposed to do?" Eli gestured for Mirela to step forward. She had been waiting quietly by the window, her silver-toned skin shimmering faintly in the light. "Mirela's been working on something that could help. I've been studying their resource harvesters," she explained. "They operate on a unique frequency band that's difficult to detect unless you know what to look for. I've developed a way to temporarily disrupt those frequencies. It's not permanent damage, just a delay." "And that's supposed to slow them down?" Alex asked, skepticism thick in his voice. "Yes," Mirela said firmly. "If we disable a few key units, it'll buy us enough time for the Council to review the evidence. It's not an attack. It's a message. Earth is not a passive target." Marcus glanced at Eli. "You're backing this plan?" "I am," Eli said without hesitation. "But this has to be clean and precise. No mistakes." The room fell into a tense silence until Alex finally exhaled sharply. "Fine. But if this goes sideways, I'm going to remind you that I told you so." Later that night, the team assembled on the outskirts of a remote desert site where a Xiphorian harvester was operating. Eli crouched low behind a sand dune, peering through binoculars at the alien device. It was massive, with spindly legs that anchored it into the ground and a humming core that glowed faintly in the darkness. Mirela knelt beside him, setting up her equipment. "Once I send the signal, it should shut down for a few hours. That'll give the Council enough time to review the situation before Zorath can replace it." Marcus, a few feet away, kept an eye on the perimeter. "You sure this won't alert them to our location?" "I've masked the transmission," Mirela said. "They'll think it's a natural interference. Nothing that would lead back to us." Eli watched her work, noting the steady movements of her hands and the calm determination in her expression. "How long until you're ready?" "Just a minute more," she replied, her fingers flying across her handheld console. "Almost there." "All right." Alex's voice came through their comms. "Perimeter's clear for now, but we don't have all night. Get it done and get out." Mirela nodded once, hit a final key, and then the humming from the harvester began to sputter. The glowing core dimmed, and within seconds, the machine powered down. "It's done," she whispered. "Let's move," Eli said, motioning for the group to retreat. As they made their way back to the extraction point, the adrenaline began to wear off. Marcus shot Eli a look. "So what's the plan if Zorath figures out it was us?" "We keep going," Eli replied. "We keep pushing back carefully. This isn't about winning a war. It's about standing our ground until the Council sees the truth." Mirela walked alongside Eli, her voice quiet but firm. "You know, this isn't something I ever thought I'd be doing, sabotaging my own people's equipment. But seeing what they've become, I can't just stand by anymore." Eli glanced at her. "You've done more than most would. You've taken a stand, even knowing what it could cost you." She looked up at him, a faint, thoughtful smile playing on her lips. And you've trusted me when I wasn't sure anyone would. That's worth something. Eli held her gaze for a moment before nodding. Let's keep trusting each other, then. As the group disappeared into the desert night, the deactivated harvester stood as a quiet reminder that Earth was willing to push back, one small step at a time. Eli paced the cramped confines of the operations room, his boots echoing faintly against the tiled floor. Screens mounted on the walls flickered with incoming reports from the field. The harvesters had been halted, at least for now. But no one doubted that Zorath would notice soon enough. Marcus sat slouched in a chair, a tablet in his hands. We've got about a day, 2 at most, before they figure out it wasn't just a technical glitch, he muttered. Mirella stood by the window, her gaze distant. Zorath won't let this slide. He'll double down once he realizes the disruption came from us. Eli stopped pacing and looked at the group. Then we need to move faster. The council has to see what's happening before Zorath can cover his tracks. Mirella, how much more evidence can we gather without tipping them off? She turned from the window, her expression thoughtful. I have access to a few more internal data streams, but every time we pull information, we risk exposure. Risk is what we signed up for, Alex chimed in from the corner. His arms were crossed, and his voice carried a note of impatience. Sitting around waiting isn't an option. We've got to keep pushing. Mirella nodded. I can get you more. It'll take time, but I can extract their internal communications, the ones that show Zorath issuing orders beyond the council's directives. That might be enough to force their hand. Good, Eli said, his voice resolute. Get it done. Marcus, you'll run interference. Make sure their detection systems stay blind while Mirella works. Alex, you're on perimeter duty again. Alex raised an eyebrow. You sure you don't want me running in there and handling this more directly? Eli smirked faintly. I think we've done enough direct action for now. Let's not overplay our hand. Mirella sat down at the console, her hands deftly navigating the alien interface. This won't be easy, she admitted. But if we're careful, we can stay ahead of Zorath's countermeasures. Hours passed as the team worked in silence, the occasional murmur of Marcus checking their network cloaking, Alex giving a perimeter update, or Mirella requesting a particular data sequence. Eli watched them all, his mind constantly analyzing the risks, calculating how much time they had before Zorath's patience snapped. When Mirella finally sat back, her hands falling to her lap, the room seemed to exhale. I've got it, she said. Internal orders, logs of unauthorized extraction sites, even communications suggesting Zorath plans to expand beyond Earth's orbit. It's all here. Now what? Marcus asked, his voice subdued after hours of tense concentration. Now, Eli said, we send it to the council through the same relay we used before. This time, we'll include a message they can't ignore. A detailed breakdown of how Zorath's actions are threatening interstellar stability. Mirella nodded. I can draft that message. If we emphasize the economic and political fallout, it might force the council to intervene. Make it compelling, Eli said. We need to shift the balance. If the council turns against Zorath, we'll finally have some breathing room. They worked late into the night, fine-tuning the message. Mirella composed a detailed report, drawing on everything they had uncovered. Alex reviewed it, adding points about Earth's strategic significance. Marcus ensured the transmission would go out undetected. By the time they were ready to send it, the sun was beginning to rise over the desert. Mirella hesitated before hitting the final send command. She looked up at Eli. This is it. Once they receive this, Zorath is going to know we've been working against him. Are we ready for that? Eli met her gaze, his expression steady. We're as ready as we'll ever be. She pressed the button. The transmission went out in a silent pulse, racing towards Zyphorian Council space. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of what they had done settled over the room. Then Alex broke the silence. We just kicked the hornet's nest. Maybe, Eli said, but we didn't have a choice. If this works, we'll finally have the upper hand. Mirella stood and walked to the window. The first light of dawn bathed the desert in soft golds and reds. Now we wait. Eli joined her, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly as he watched the horizon. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We wait." The meeting chamber aboard the Zyphorian flagship hummed faintly with the sound of alien machinery. The Zyphorian Council, projected as shimmering holograms around the room, looked down at Zorith and his Earth delegation with expressions that, even to Eli Turner's eyes, were unmistakably critical. Zorith stood stiffly in the center of the room, his long metallic hands clasped behind his back. His usual calm had cracked. "These accusations," he began, his voice carrying an uncharacteristic edge, "are baseless. My actions were fully sanctioned by our initial agreement with the Council." Mirela, standing just a step behind Eli, spoke up. "The data we presented proves otherwise, Zorith. You authorized resource extractions far beyond what was agreed upon. You kept your own counsel, literally, while bypassing the proper channels." Eli glanced at her briefly, nodding in approval. It had taken hours of careful planning and even more careful wording. But the evidence they'd sent had finally reached the Council and forced this hearing. Now it was a matter of making it stick. One of the holographic figures, a high-ranking counselor with a gleaming bronze complexion and crystalline eyes, leaned forward. "Zorith," the counselor said, his voice low and deliberate. "The transmissions we reviewed indicate a direct order to mine Earth's rare minerals without consent. We demand an explanation." Zorith's metallic lips twitched. "It was an interpretation of the Council's broader directive. We were told to secure resources efficiently, and Earth's resources presented the most logical choice. That's not what the records show." Eli cut in, his voice calm but firm. "You didn't just take what you needed. You exploited our planet and risked irreparable damage to its ecosystems. If that's what you consider efficient, then it's no wonder your own scientists stood against you." Mirela stepped forward. "Counselors, I've worked alongside Zorith for years. I believed in our mission, to foster cooperation, to exchange knowledge, and to ensure mutual growth. But I can no longer stand by and watch our principles be twisted to justify these actions." Zorith's choices were his own, not the Council's. Zorith turned sharply toward her, his tone cold. "You're out of line, Mirela. And you're out of control," she shot back. The counselor raised a hand, silencing the exchange. "Commander Turner," the counselor said, addressing Eli, "what is Earth's position in light of these revelations?" Eli stepped forward, meeting the holographic eyes of the counselor. "Earth is willing to work with the Zyphorian people. We believe in mutual cooperation, in learning from each other. But that cooperation must be built on trust and transparency. Zorith's actions have eroded that trust. If the Council can assure us that these practices will end and that future relations will be conducted openly, we can begin to rebuild that trust." The room fell silent for a moment. The holographic counselors turned to one another, their muted conversation just out of reach. Zorith stood rigid, his jaw tight. Eli could see the gears turning in his mind, the calculations he was making. But this time it wasn't his decision to make. Finally, the lead counselor turned back to the room. "The Council will deliberate further, but for now, we are suspending Zorith's authority over Earth's operations. Mirela, you will take over as the lead liaison. Commander Turner, you will be our primary point of contact moving forward. This arrangement is temporary, pending our final decision." Zorith's expression darkened, but he said nothing. Eli allowed himself a small breath of relief. It wasn't a total victory, but it was a step in the right direction. As the holograms faded, Zorith turned to Eli and Mirela, his voice low and sharp. "You think this changes anything? You think the Council will fully side with you? You've made a mistake, Turner. And you, Mirela, you've betrayed your own people." Mirela met his glare without flinching. "I stood for what's right. That's not betrayal. It's accountability." Eli stepped between them. "Zorith, it's over. Let it go." Zorith's metallic eyes narrowed, but after a tense moment, he turned and left the chamber without another word. As they exited the meeting room, Marcus joined them in the hallway, his usual sarcastic smirk tempered by a hint of genuine concern. "So, how'd it go?" "Better than we hoped," Eli said. "Zoratha's been removed. At least for now." Marcus let out a low whistle. "Well, that's something. What's next?" Mirela folded her arms, her gaze thoughtful. "We have to rebuild what's been broken. This isn't just about stopping Zorath. It's about proving that Earth and Zyphorians can work together, on equal footing this time." Eli nodded. "Agreed. And it starts with us. We set the example." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You mean you're not kicking back after this mess? You're diving straight into more diplomacy?" Eli grinned faintly. "You know me, Marcus. There's no rest for the weary." Mirela's expression softened as she glanced at Eli. "And you're not doing it alone. We'll make it work." Eli met her gaze, feeling a rare moment of hope, not just for Earth, but for what humanity and the Zyphorians could achieve together. The sun rose over the desert, casting warm golden light on the temporary Alliance base. The air still carried a slight chill, and Eli Turner stepped out onto the command center's observation deck. From here, he could see the distant shimmer of the Zyphorian ship, its angular lines catching the morning glow. Though the tension of the previous days hadn't fully lifted, there was an undeniable sense that the tide had turned. Marcus Reed appeared beside him, a cup of steaming coffee in hand. "Not a bad view," Marcus said, sipping from the mug. "You almost forget we've got an advanced alien civilization parked on our doorstep." Eli chuckled softly, though his gaze didn't leave the horizon. "Almost. Any word from the council?" "Nothing yet. Mirela's been busy coordinating with their new liaison team, but it's quiet so far. Zoratha's still sulking somewhere on his ship." "Let him sulk," Eli said. "He can't act without the council's approval now. That gives us time." Marcus nodded, then gave Eli a sideways glance. "You've been at this non-stop for weeks. When are you going to let someone else take the reins for a bit?" Eli smirked. "When the dust settles, maybe. Right now, there's too much left to do." Before Marcus could reply, Mirela stepped out onto the deck, her silver-hued skin catching the sunlight in a way that always seemed otherworldly. "We just received an update from the council," she said, holding a slim datapad. "They've confirmed Zoratha's removal from all operations involving Earth. They're establishing a formal review of his actions and assigning a new envoy to oversee our partnership." Eli turned to face her fully, his expression softening. "That's good news. Did they say when the envoy arrives?" "They're sending a preliminary team in 2 weeks," Mirela replied. "In the meantime, I'm the interim lead, which means you're stuck working with me for a while longer." "Could be worse," Eli said with a faint grin. "You've already proven you know how to handle the tough calls." Mirela smiled back, though there was a touch of seriousness in her eyes. "We've still got a long way to go. Zoratha's policies have left scars, both on Earth and within my own people. Building real trust isn't going to happen overnight." Eli looked out at the horizon again, thinking carefully before he spoke. "Trust takes time, but it starts with consistency. We show them we're willing to collaborate, that we're not going to be taken advantage of. If we can do that, we've got a chance at something better." Marcus took another sip of his coffee. "Sounds like a lot of work for someone who hasn't had a decent night's sleep since first contact. Is that your way of volunteering to handle today's reports?" Eli asked, raising an eyebrow. Marcus groaned. "Fine, I'll start on them, but only if you promise to get some rest tonight." Eli gave him a half nod, knowing it was a promise he might not keep. As Marcus wandered back inside, Mirela stepped closer, resting her hands on the railing. "Do you really believe it can work?" she asked quietly. "Humans and Zyphorians working together as equals? I think it's worth trying," Eli said. "What we did, sending that message, standing up to Zorath, it proved we can push back without turning this into a fight. Now we have to keep showing them what we're made of." Mirela glanced over at him, her expression thoughtful. "You've done more than just push back, Eli. You've shown me that standing up for what's right matters, even when it's hard, even when it feels impossible." He met her gaze, and for a moment, The weight of everything they had been through seemed to lift. "You've done the same for me, Mirela. I couldn't have done any of this without you." The two of them stood there in silence for a while, watching as the sun climbed higher, the warmth spreading across the desert and the base below. It was a new day, one full of challenges, certainly, but also full of possibilities. They had faced the brink and pulled back. Now it was time to build something better.